Well, welcome, Chris. It's so great to connect with you. My children are grown now, but I'm excited to hear your thoughts on building spiritual habits in the home because I do have five grandkids now that I'd love to pour into. So, just to kick us off, Chris, what initially inspired you to write Building Spiritual Habits in the Home? And how does it specifically address the gap between people's desire for spiritual growth versus their actual practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I set out writing the book with my friend Clayton Green, it actually didn't begin as a book project. It began as a problem that we were experiencing during Christmas several years ago. So our kids were little, the preschool age, 4 or 5 years old, and we had very consistently wanted to do an Advent practice with them, but we would start it, do a few readings with them. The kids would lose interest, and eventually we would
Mm-hmm.
just never finish. So Clayton said, what if we made this tangible and playful so that the kids would want to return to it and then attach that to some sort of Bible resource? So we made a thing that we ended up calling Advent blocks, which is a 25-day practice. The blocks are lined up 1 to 25 on the mantle. And on top, you have a block that marches along from 1 to 25. Every day as you move it along, you turn the block and you see an image that corresponds to the story of the day. And so we read all the way from Adam through Abraham and Moses, all of the Old Testament, the story of God coming to earth to stay. And
Mm-hmm.
because it's tangible and because it's playful, we found for the first time our kids were begging to do the very next story and the very next story. So by the time we got to
Mm-hmm.
Christmas, they were the accountability devices, keeping us on track rather than us forcing it.
Mm-hmm.
We shared this with a few families, then hundreds and thousands of other families. And the feedback we got was, this is the first time that I have not just started, but it's been easy to finish an Advent practice. And that's when it clicked for us. I think there's something here that we could
Mm-hmm.
reverse engineer the process for this one item we have to say,
Mm-hmm.
what if we made other spiritual practices this easy, this tangible, this playful to help people kickstart spiritual practices and make it easier for them to do the things they already want to do?
Can you share some practical examples of like small spiritual habits that church leaders can encourage in their congregations that both, I guess, are sustainable, like you're talking about, and also impactful?
Yeah, I mean, the first and easiest thing I would say is all the things that we've created at GoodKind, like Advent blocks, kind of already do this work to say, look, we know this is difficult. Put this in your home. If you've got Advent blocks, for instance, this is going to do the work for you. But a lot of people aren't going to want to go and get those products, which is fine. So we would say, look at a couple elements. Look at how you can make something really, really tangible and then make it playful. And this specifically
Mm-hmm.
for parents. So you want to do something with the kids to have them care about prayer. Awesome. Get a jar in your kitchen and fill it with popsicle sticks and put a pen nearby so that they can take a popsicle stick out and just scribble on there with their 4-year-old sloppy handwriting,
Yeah.
I want to pray for Meemaw. And then they could put it back in the jar, and because it's tangible, because it's something they can kind of play with, they will return to that more often because that's there. Or for instance, you could next to the bed, you want to pray more with them at night. Encourage them to get a nice little pad for them to kneel on. The fact that it's beautiful, that it is tactile, will make them say, oh, this is neat. This is my little prayer pad. And you can just spend
Mm-hmm.
30 seconds there saying, what do we want to pray for before we go to bed? So the more that they could think of like specific tangible things, it's not easy and it takes a lot of creativity, but that'll actually make it so that the kids end up kind of inviting more of the spiritual habits, which makes it more likely to continue.
Yeah, in essence, it's visible, it's tangible, tactile. Those are the things that draw the kids towards it.
Yeah, and playful.
Yeah.
We often get really stuck because as grown-ups, we think that Christianity is important, and important means it's serious. And there are times to be very serious.
Mm-hmm.
But if we bore our kids to tears with the way we're inviting them into Christianity, it's not going to be inviting for them. And so
Mm-hmm.
there are ways for us to say, look, this could be silly and playful. We created a thing called the Gratitude, which is a little wooden die. You just keep it on the
Mm.
dinner table, you roll it. It's got 12 sides, and each side has just some aspect of life, nature, food, someone you saw today. And the point of this is to help with a gratitude practice, which we all want. But
Mm-hmm.
cultivating gratitude in kids can feel really stiff and like prescriptive. Like you must say
Yep.
thank you. This makes
Mm-hmm.
it fun. So they roll it. They're like, oh, who's a friend I saw today? I saw Judah in school and he gave me a sticker. Like, awesome. Thank God for Judah. It really
Mm-hmm.
can be that playful, and the playful element can still be cultivating a good spiritual habit that we want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You actually make it sound easy. I love it. At the Summit Church, like what observable outcomes have you seen when families intentionally build these spiritual habits together?
Yeah, there's a ton of benefit to doing this kind of aligned together. Um, I'm not a scientist, but I've heard that what makes lasers work is that lasers are like beams of light that if you take one, if it's generally the light is diffuse, right? And it just goes all
Yep.
over and shines. But if you stack one beam on top of another, that becomes so strong that it's a laser that can cut through stuff. And
Yeah.
that is kind of the experience we have when we're practicing spiritual habits as a community here at the summit. That
Mm-hmm.
all these families doing them separately, it does some good work. But when we align and all of us together are reading through the same book of the Bible, we've
Mm-hmm.
all decided that we're actually going to be reading the Jesus Storybook Bible together or do specific things all at the same time. It's like that laser beam where it just has
Yes.
so much more power and resonance. And it also makes it a ton more fun. You're talking with other people. It's easier to motivate yourself to keep going because this isn't just me on an island. We are all doing this together, and there's a momentum that almost pulls you forward.
Yeah, I actually love that quote. I use it all the time with churches. It's from Al Reese. I think his book is The Power of Focus because I always relate it to sometimes we're just doing so many things. We're just sunburning people. But what if we really focus our activities and what we're working on so that we can be a laser beam? So I love how you've laid that on with the spiritual practices. It's a great example. Um, you mentioned starting small, right? Finding grace when needed and then trying again. How can church leaders effectively like communicate this approach to spiritual disciplines without it seeming like they're lowering expectations?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And it's something we wrestled with as we've been developing our products and encouraging people in their spiritual habits. Are we telling people that, 30 seconds of prayer and maybe reading 2 Bible verses a day is like all you ever need and that's it? And we're not. But we are recognizing that if you want to get to the spot where you know your Bible backwards and forwards, where prayer is like breathing for you, it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
start by doing that tomorrow and saying, all right, tomorrow I will pray for 2 hours and memorize a chapter of Romans. You could try. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people do try, but they burn themselves out. And so after a
Mm-hmm.
week of sprinting, they just lay it aside. So we say, well, wouldn't it be better if everybody in the church was taking one small step today? Because if
Yes.
everybody did that, that would make a difference in that day.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take a small step today, and then again the next day, and then the next, eventually you'll look back and realize I've traveled miles and miles, but I did it
Mm-hmm.
in this incremental way. I've seen this image. You may have seen it online of somebody standing, little stick figure standing next to a ladder, and there's 2 stick figures and 2 ladders, and one of them has the rungs like 8 feet apart, about as tall as a
Yep.
stick figure. The other one
Yep.
has them, just a few inches apart. And the question is, which one of these people is going to get to the top of the ladder? And it's the one with the smaller rungs, not because
Yeah.
the ladder is shorter, but because we've said, all right, it's a long journey. Let me give you some really small steps because we're in this for a lifetime. God intends to transform us over the course of 60, 70 years. So
Mm-hmm.
let him do that work. Put yourself in the spot to let him do the work in small increments, day by day by day.
And it seems so doable. Then it reminds me of when I first read Atomic Habits and that same concept. Just do a little bit, and you build up to a lot. You get a lot done through just those small habits and those small steps. What role, Christy, does the church community play in reinforcing these home based habits at the Summit Church?
The church community can do a ton to reinforce the habits in the home by offering encouragement as one. From the pulpit to say, like, look, this is kind of the target of what we're trying to do. Oftentimes we find that our folks feel adrift and lost in what their spiritual disciplines are supposed to be because literally nobody has told them and said specifically, hey, you know what's a good idea? Set your alarm clock 30 minutes earlier. And when you get up, read this passage of scripture and pray like this. Jesus really helped us out. His disciples said, we don't know how to pray. And he didn't say, well, sounds like a spiritual issue. We should really, fix it. No, he said, okay, can I give you a model? Can I teach you how to pray? And he started very 101, holding their hand. He said, okay, say this. Just literally say these phrases. So I think we can encourage people with specific tools to say, try these things. And from the pulpit down, that's a huge way to do it. Another thing we can do is not paint too rosy a picture of what these spiritual habits and disciplines look like for those of us who are in ministry, as if every night we have a wonderful, beautiful, meaningful devotional time around the table with our family, and there's never any distractions, and our kids ask really insightful questions. We need to let people know we all, as parents, feel like varying degrees of failures, even if we're engaging with this consistently, because kids are changing so rapidly. Our understanding of scripture is imperfect, and we try some things, they don't work. And so if the families in our congregation feel like, well, I can never get to that level because the pastor gets up, he prays for an hour and he's never distracted. His kids always listen to him when he talks about the Bible. Well, then we failed them because they're going to feel like there's no point. But if we let them know, hey, look, we're all struggling here. Here's literally what my devotional time with my kids looked like. Last night I asked them what they wanted to pray for, and they said they wanted to pray for mac and cheese for dinner the next night. That's okay. Be open and honest and transparent. That gives people the permission to say, all right, this is what this actually looks like. Maybe this is the sort of thing I can engage into.
For church leaders who are watching this today, what would be like your top 3 recommendations to help them create a culture that bridges Sunday worship into everyday faith practices in their homes?
Yeah, I would say, number one, if they haven't already, the book that Clayton and I wrote is an excellent place to start. Building Spiritual Habits in the Home. It takes everything I've talked about here, everything we've learned over the past 7 years, and kind of condenses it into one playbook. So it teaches spiritual roots for spiritual habits. It also teaches why the spiritual habits for the people in your congregations aren't working and what you can actually tell them to help it work. That's one item. Another thing I would say is do not ever stray away from the power of grace to change people. We very much want people to read their Bibles more, to bring their kids to church, to practice the Sabbath, to pray, list all of them.
Yeah.
And sometimes we think that if we really hammer how important these things are, that we tell them they've got to, that will lead them to do it more. And it might for a little while. It's kind of a mechanical change where you're pushing and pushing and pushing. But as soon as you take your hands off, it'll snap back and they'll resist. And it takes a lot of guts and it takes a lot of faith to actually say, if I tell people that they are fully accepted by God, loved and known by God, without ever doing anything, that will actually motivate them to change. It's counterintuitive, but this is the beauty and irony of the gospel, that if people know they are already accepted in God, they will be more likely to do things to draw near to him. So don't ever get away from the power of grace. Grace in the gospel is not just the entry point into the Christian life, as if that's how you sign the marriage certificate and you forget about it. It is the fuel that moves us through the Christian life and empowers us in our spiritual disciplines.
It's a good word. It's a good word. All right. So those were 2. Do you have a third?
You asked for 3. Sorry, a third. Check out our website, GoodKind.shop, which has a bunch of tangible tools. You can find the Advent blocks I talked about, the gratitude. We have things called sticky prayers, which are like stickers with some texture to it that you can put on your phone, and other items that they kind of interrupt you enough to give you a moment to pause and pray. All of those tools we've found are tremendously helpful in bridging the gap. And the nice thing about all of them is you don't have to do a ton of teaching. People know they ought to pray. People know that they want to read about the Bible at Christmas time. They just need something to get them from the thing they know they want to do to actually remind them to do it. And what we make at GoodKind are items, like you mentioned in Atomic Habits, items that make it really, really easy to incentivize the decision you already want to make, rather than kind of the inertia towards the decisions you don't want to.
So good. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Yeah, it's been a blast. Thank you so much.